There was one more person to whom I wrote in regard of this entire matter, and that was Prince William. Now that happened in a process after someone projected me a couple of images, very strongly in reference to monarchy family of England and in reference to Jesus Christ. I'm going to assume all amounted actually for some kind of activation or awakening of my hidden consciousness, and certainly worked, because all of a sudden brought my entire thinking on completely different levels. And I found myself instantly reacting on these matters by instantly creating some kind of profile of persona that needed to handle the entire situation, based on certain images that have been projected. I did instantly, first attempt was to identify to which year 414 number, which was projected to my mind with as landing in fire from the sky, falling from the sky in fiery image, number 414. First thing I did is to check what happened in year 414 before Christ, and found that was here when Archelaus was activated, was inaugurated, or something. Some of that year was very much in relation with Archelaus, one of ancient Macedonian kings that actually united Macedonia, which later became a foundation for development of the entire ancient Macedonian empire. That further brought me, the next clue was the movie Alexander. And what I didn't like about that movie was interpretation of Olympia with snakes, and what I read about Olympia in the records on various in various sources, and she was everywhere projected as witch, as something to do with magic, and with all of this very unattractive profile projected with her, and I just could have not accepted that. I certainly was aware of my very strong but also very positive personality I bring, and very caring. I am, and I was a very caring person, very attached to things that I do, wasting myself, investing myself in things I do or I have in my life. I never passed through my life just by accident or for an instance. I have very studious and very systematic approach to events of my life. And I could have not leave Olympia like that. All of a sudden, that became my first instant reaction. In summa summarum of all of that happened in very short period of time, maybe over a week time, with intensive bombarding with these mega images. What emerged as a result was my determination to recover image of Olympia. And that is how I emerged, and that is how my work got born. Out of that attempt to project the ancient history in 21st century and to deliver my answers via my existence, born on the territory, understanding the territory, representing, I'm very sure, the history of the territory on certainly higher account than where I would find, for example, governments or random people, to the extent that always I considered myself exceptional in terms of how I approach life, as I just explained, um, and valued myself and my presence in the world equally as I valued the world as well. I certainly found myself in enough competence to attempt to deliver a character from such territories on my own account, without asking anyone for permission, but rather delivering this rather artistic profile and presentation um, of a character that certainly was imaginary, uh, if we talk about Olympia, mother of Alexander, but nothing of imaginary if we talk about my character and my existence on the planet. So here, I somehow found myself bridging the two profiles. And that is how emerged my entire thinking on absolute dimensions, on historic dimensions, on then a couple of movies certainly happened that were talking about going in Egypt, about going over tombs, and the entire Indiana Jones equally movies. All that was suggesting that people have been into this. As a matter of fact, the entire last century, most of British but worldwide scientists as well were very intensively visiting Egypt and pyramids of Egypt, were completely dissecting the entire field of kings of Egypt, the entire graveyard of kings of Egypt in the area around pyramids on the banks of Nile in last century. So that certainly gave me enough foundations that I emerged out of this as myself, but very much bringing all of the past and recognizing plenty of it in my own character, and being free enough, challenged enough to make this kind of work that's going to deal with all of the questions in between these two times, the present and the past, especially the ancient, because not much of it has been covered in the books, in the school programs. Very little we have been studying, being born in socialism Yugoslavia, that was completely erasing ancient history and any reminiscence or a respect of ancient history, following the religious approach, while on the other side equally closing doors to religions to quite an extent. And returning uh, to beginnings, to bite the tail of the snake here, returning to tribunal societies. That was another reason um, to jump here on this stage, because there was completely not accomplished here now, this stage in which we are, where we don't know, is it socialism, is it capitalism, is it tribunalism. There was a serious amount of people that were very much impressed by what socialism gave to them. And that caste was very ready to march to the future and bring socialism on the planet. And I was not happy with such idea, because from my perspective of my kind of people, socialism was overtaking our space, suffocating us, pushing us in the corners, and vandalizing us and violating our existence and our stamp on the planet. And that was already wrong. It was not natural. It was not how anyone can promise future in absolute. And I needed to make very strong presence initially to stop development of socialism all over the planet. So that became, therefore, the initial task, to prevent global socialism, because it was driving on very low level, it was driving on the level of working class, it was diminishing, disrespecting, discriminating intelligence, it was vandalizing intelligence, it was in opposition, in strong opposition of intelligence to the extent that to the present days we have concept of rotten children, or someone is calling it Rothschild. No, that's not Rothschild. The reference is to rotten children. And we still have everywhere in the world intelligence being referred and treated and managed and manipulated as rotten children. We have this planet going nowhere because certain caste of this planet does not want the planet to go anywhere. They just want the planet to continue to exist on their prime levels, where they don't need to advance, they don't need to get educated, they don't need to be intelligent, and yet they can, and they are powerful. No, that is not what I could have accepted. What you should accept, what no one, that we as a humanity cannot accept. Human exists on a practical intelligent being. We cannot sabotage our own definition of human. And it looked to me everything as one big sabotage of what human is. I needed to step out. All of a sudden I realized that there is no one else that can do this. And no one else was even aware that they should do anything about it. All of a sudden I realized I have to jump on this. There was no time to think. I needed to bring the voice forward. And I am going to assume that I have very solid circle of very serious assistants on the highest of the levels of the planet, of the pyramid, of the planet, that are seriously assisting my work because they seriously believe me. Because they have heard me. They could have, they can plug into my emotions, into my sentiments, into my mind, and they trust me, they believe me. Now what we inherited and from where I needed to pull out, it's another question. As I have said, there was plenty on task, on call, on my consciousness. You see, some people are talking about there is enormous opposition here to what I do here. Of course, enormous opposition, which required that I always keep somehow secretive my real name, my real identity. I was having at that stage kids that were still in younger age. They were not even yet in their 18th. So I needed, they were still in high school. Well, I needed really to be very careful how I'm going to develop my profile. And certainly to keep away my private life from any of this. So choosing pseudonyms became the most logical event. But what I want to say is that I needed some infrastructure. I needed some stage. I needed some base of people that can actually assist, so I can bring this work on suitably high level and do and accomplish what I intended and what I had to accomplish here. I would like to mention here that there are certain comments now going on as there are certain categories of people that are jumping on the role of humanitarians or saviors because they have some kind of mental, differently formatted the mind. Well, maybe it is differently formatted, but I'm talking about not a medical situation. I'm talking about build-up of characters within the line of genetics stamps, which certainly was the reason why entire palette of Indiana Jones-like movies have been created just 15 years ago or 20 years ago. These kind of movies were very, very popular. Well, that is not much to do with mindset of a person, but with with mental construct of a person, but with the history itself, isn't it? Now let's focus on this couple of parameters that you need to keep in mind when you're discussing the entire situation. First of all, keep in mind that we talk here about ancient stamps that someone was very much keeping eye on in all of the times. That is, we talk about secret here in the religion, in all over the Bible, in around all of the concept of secret societies. Therefore, another momentum you have to keep in mind all of the time is that we have enormously popular and developed concept of secret societies, which in themselves withhold the reference to secret. How you're going to call that? Now, in secret or what? Secret or what? Now, connect these two points. First being ancient stamps, still very much someone keeping eye on. Then secret societies, what you get? Well, you get something that has nothing to do with my mental conditioning, for sure, but with the realm on the planet. Another momentum, keep on perspective. I have been living in socialism. I have been studying economy. I have been, that is certainly social studying of the society and the political ideology, political economy, of the socialism. And then I have been living in capitalism. There are specific exposures of a person enough intelligent and enough in capacity to do solid analysis on these matters. How you're going to call that? Then I'm certainly enclosing a mountain of personality, which I never found I need to apologize to anyone about, yet found very hard to reconcile in the socialism where everything was driven on lower ground. I never managed to accept that, and would result in me being isolated. They just isolated me. They just put me aside. They just kept me unemployed because I could have not accept to fold my spine enough for their account, for their taste. How you're going to call that? The fact that we are being born with certain personality? Well, you have King of England at the moment. You're not going to expecting to play a carpet for the humanity, so everyone can walk over his spine. Why anyone would expect me to behave like that? If I bring personality of my temples, then I wrote thousands of the pages to explain to you what that means. And how you are going to call that? Well, you are going to call that how you should call that, and not in any other way. You are going to call that reality. And you will need to learn how to relate to reality, or otherwise you will be having mental issues yourself, not incapacity to accept reality as it is. Well, that is certainly a mental issue. I'm going to call it over-averaged, insignificant presence of a human. And that inspired me to write a book under the name Code of Human and Code of Human Civilization, and to explain to you that human does have a spine, vertical one, not horizontal. That was my first attempt to explain to all of the humanity. The human is vertical point, not horizontal. I cannot stop talking more than 10 hours per day. I have written pages that I cannot manage to edit and properly publish to the rest of my life. Well, I hope I'm going to live enough, and I hope I'm going to have enough time. But the fact is that every single day I write new pages. And I need to handle the new pages, I need to handle the older pages, I need to do the social presentation, and it's too much for one person. And I have asked Monarchy of England to give me assistance. They have refused. I did my promise. I wrote a letter to Prince William. I connected to his mother and her alignment to concept of freedom, which was somehow very popular in the 80s as well. I find my personality very much orbiting in that area, and I assume that he would bring something from her genetics that would be eager to test the times. What I could have not properly set in that letter is how I'm going to find myself attached to the entire concept. I could have not said at that time. I just said now. But I was very much aware that they are following my work. There was no need to say much. Later on, I wrote a letter to United Nations where I clarify much more how I see my work in the context of everything I do here. I'm going to assume that that somehow amends the letter I have wrote to Prince William, where I somehow was much more submissive to the entire monarchical protocol. Although my letter was nothing about submissiveness, my letter was talking about I'm beginning the world wild revolution. There is nothing here to talk about submissiveness. It was rather attempt to say I have made promise to young generations that they're not going to be punished as in the previous century, where most of the people that died were young people. I wanted to say, with this revolution, I have intention to save young people because they're the ones that need to bring the future. So although what I wanted to say, and I have not said, of course, in that letter, but what I wanted to say is, if I happen that I criticize harshly whatever I'm going to criticize, I am making here a promise to save the young generation. And that is what that letter was very much about. So what I want to say today, that I am a person that looks as keeping my promises. I wasn't having life where I was making too much promises to anyone else but to myself. And usually they would always be delivered. So when I make a promise, when you make a promise, it's a moral liability. I'm going to keep to my promise, but certainly it would be conditional on not to limit what I have to do here, and to actually be understood as, in substance, what I want to say. I am in promise here to save lives. But what we need to do here, we need to do. I certainly would be very careful about not hurting these young people. Here it is where everything becomes very sensitive, and I'm trying to mitigate all this in best possible way, mostly by presenting the real situation and how things are, so we all actually find ourselves here thinking about the events and dealing actually with the situation as it is, which I have done with my work, presenting the situation in the way how before it was not presented, and in the way how before it was not delivered this level of assistance, in the way how you should be thinking and how we should be thinking about certain aspects and certain matters in our lives, which have just dropped from our attention and continue to drop from our attention. And people notice things, but because they have not some kind of consequent thinking, line of thinking developed properly, they don't know how to react to things that just happen every new day, and they continue to be bombarded, surprised, and basically paralyzed to a certain extent, because would not have a proper line of thinking developed via the civilizational interface that we have developed, we have delivered, given to us at the moment, via education, via the social network, via news and the entire mainstream media. which build how we perceive this world, and in the same time block any alternative way of thinking. However, I hate any movements that have just one sentence, bring avalanche of distractions, even of war, and nothing gets solved, and nothing gets even said enough. You have enormous movement of Martin Luther King just made one speech, and everyone talked just about one speech of Martin Luther King. I am talking about complete reformation, about the civilizational perspective and formation of societies. Not calling people on the streets, but in universities. I have been giving them in all of these 10 years tasks, what they need to study and what cathedrals they need to open in universities. I expect people to think on this, not to make riots on the streets. I hate disorder and I hate material damages. I hate when people damage things and when people hurt themselves. And I have made promise here to save lives. Yeah, they are using my work now to launch the biggest war in the recent time. And they're literally plaguing on my work. Not to make peace, but to make war. And that is what is my opposition today. But I have said, I'm calling human today on being as intelligent being. And I will continue to do so. And maybe that letter was too naive, or look to the people, to these people that are controlling that monarchy of England. Maybe it looked to them too naive. But for me, they look too worn, too stupid, and too irrelevant. I don't know how naive I am, but I'm certainly systematic. And I think they got that impression as well. I'm also a very determined person. And I'm also a very fair play person. I think they would notice that as well. What obviously it is a bit confusing here is that I sound fresh. Well, I cannot fake on that, but I don't mind really, to be honest. I mean, in times when everyone is concerned about aging, I should feel rather flattered that sound as someone that does not age so easily. That is what you wanted to say. Well, then say it properly. I don't age easily. Yeah, that's correct. And the main reason is because I know how to take care of myself. Maybe you should start doing that as well, rather than walking human on level of animals, but then call it that human. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't go very often out because I cannot be tormented by what various people are going to say to you, how they are going to say it, or what they are going to do. I found that very much exhausting, my obviously sensitive character, and I found myself rather limiting number of people that I'm going to be with, limited my exposure. Various compromising situations where I would not be in position to control the situation. So yes, it is a rather protective environment in which I nurture myself. But I think I owe you that answer. You don't talk about me being naive. You talk about me being youthful. Yes, it is not fallen just like that. It is what I'm working on, clearly. My character also here delivers certain traces of personality that I didn't have time to before to notice, even because I was always after accomplishing task after task after task that I would to give to myself, obviously, and clearly was not having enough time to notice myself. And none of the people were very much in my environment dedicated to let me to develop on my own drive, obviously because they saw me as some kind of precious experiment or something. Were even more contributing to this more rather isolated way of my entire life, in how my entire life happened actually from earlier age years. In any case scenario, not being aware of my actual personality because no one talked to me about it, but certainly complained indirectly. That is what I don't like. When people do not talk in your face about the way how you grow and manifest yourself, and I think that parents should be actually involved here. That is what means and looks like to look after kids. You actually talk to your kids. Now that was not case in my life. There is not that kind of a mirror one can use. I'm aware that some of you certainly used a mirror called television for a very long period of time, and we have entire concept of Western society now building new generations upon monitoring the worlds that are under their feet, and through that monitoring of other people, they learn from their mistakes and they bring themselves in much more perfect version. It's very pity that they cannot monitor our mind, or should I say they can. So that is how I'm going to find myself equally, therefore, very much in continuation to the entire concept of flying on the moon protocol, of launching satellites, not that much to monitor the actual moon, but to monitor the people living on other territories that would be under their military equipment constraint. That certainly motivates enough people to continue investing in military industry and in military weapons, in war, in making war, and continuing to build control for their citizens, so they can, at some future time, be in promise to play gods on the planet on the account of the previous or real one. So it altogether becomes much more harder for me to keep the promises I was determined to provide. Because all of a sudden I realized the positions in which I am versus the position in which these people are that I have wrote a letter is profoundly different. And here I am the one promising them savior. I can imagine the sarcasm and irony that it must be that they felt upon reading my letter of promising the mercy for the future. Also, I would imagine that as time started to pass by, they would start thinking about that letter in more and more serious manner. I hope it will be rather natural process of developing of the entire situation. However, what I want to say here is that that letter and the way how it can be understood depends very much on the circumstances. And it cannot be understood in some kind of absolute conditions, very much in relative, upon the actual events unveiling every single day.